Hey everybody, welcome to That Expert Show, where you help run the show. I'm Anna Canzano. Thank you so much for being with us on this broadcast. It's an important topic that we're tackling today, and I want to have a real dialogue about it. We're talking about race, which can be, a tricky topic to take on. It can make people feel uncomfortable, but I think it's an important one, especially given the times right now. Our guest has been honored in the past as a White House champion of change in technology inclusion. She has been the Equity Strategic Advisor for the City of Seattle in the past and is founder of a STEM+Arts program for youth of color called iUrban Teen, which is award-winning and nationally recognized. Joining us live from Seattle right now is Deena Pierott. Deena, thank you so much for being with us and for being the best person I could think of to talk to about this, because you are real, you are raw, and you're not afraid to take on the tough questions.
Oh, well, Anna, thank you. Thank you so very much. And you're right, I am pretty raw, with this, and I like to have real dialogue. That's the only time where you're going to be able to make the changes that we need. But before we start, I really would like to give a message to my community, okay, to the Black community, because the things that we're going through and what we're feeling right now, we all know that right now we're going through a collective grieving period, a collective trauma that only we know what that feels like, okay? It's a cellular ache that we have when every time we hear or see a George Floyd, a Breonna Taylor, an Ahmaud Arbery, an Emmett Till, it's a cellular PTSD that we go through. So it's okay for self-care. It's okay for you to sit and still and be quiet. It's okay for you just to practice self-care and meditation for right now, because we need healing in our community. So don't forget self-care, and don't forget to breathe.
That is such an important, as you talk about breathe, I'm thinking about the protests, I'm thinking about the murder of George Floyd. And I'm also thinking about, how it's hard to understand the full impact of systemic racism and how it can be essentially an attack on your mind, body, and soul over the days, over the years, over the generations. Can you explain that impact? Because I don't think anybody can really understand it unless you have walked through, in the shoes of someone who has experienced it.
Exactly. You can't. And it's hard to even describe the trauma that we endure day in, day out, every day of our lives. We have to worry about and wonder, what's going to happen to me today. But there's all these signals that come to us that trigger that PTSD. When people make certain comments, in the workplace when you're overlooked for opportunities, in the stores when you're not greeted as graciously as other people are. I mean, those are things that keep attacking us and spearing us through the heart, that we endure. And like I said, you can't even describe it. When with George Floyd, with his murder that we saw on TV, it hit us at such an ancestral ache, so deeply that we felt like we couldn't breathe. I worry about my sons. I have two African American sons. And I always say that's one of the hardest roles in life, is to be the mother of Black sons, because no matter how you try to protect them when they're growing up, that society is waiting for them, So you have to put it in a higher power's hands to just look over them and pray safety for them.
So help someone understand too, the conversations that you have to have and how they're different. Because I'm sure there's a certain segment of the population that looks at history and says, well, look how many years have gone by. And, why isn't the Black population over this by now? There's a callous sense that you see those comments, here and then, where it's like basically the message is, well, toughen up. Can't you be over this by now? And can you help people understand why that's not as easily said and done?
Well, because we're not allowed to be over it. The white demographics, they will not allow us to be over it, because they consistently, with the systemic racism, we have to live through that day in and day out. There were just 2 Black men lynched in California here recently. lynched. So that racial terrorism is still going on. So how can we let it go when they are consistently showing up in that space?
I think it's interesting, Deena, that you've done a lot of work throughout your career, both in the public and the private sector. So I want to talk to you about institutions, organizations, schools, municipalities, companies, nonprofits. What are things that these entities do that actually contribute to racism and they may not even be aware of it?
Well, the first thing is first they have to try to acknowledge it. I do feel that the majority of them already know that their systems are broken. They already know. So a part of them, large group of them, don't care. We've been doing this for this long. It's not broken. Let's keep doing this. And then a part of them feel like they're powerless to make any change. It's too difficult. It's going to take up too much time to try to make these changes occur. But somebody has to be the champion within that organization to start making those changes. So I think that in these organizations, and it has to come from the top, it actually has to be, even the line staff has to be involved, but the messaging has to come from the top. But they really have to know the why and the how of it, not just do it because it's for photo ops. Because right now, with everything that's going on, you see a lot of companies jumping on the equity bandwagon with these quick statements that they came up with overnight. To me, it's not genuine. It's not authentic. You haven't really done the work. You really haven't taken the deeper dive on why is this important to your organization. Really take the time to sit back and realize, how are we going to make a change? How are we going to be a more equitable organization, and the reasons why behind it? Don't just throw a statement out there and think that we're going to go for it, because it's still months and months from now, your organization might circle right back to the systemic racism and policies and procedures that you had in place early on. So, so I'm thinking that, one, they're not acknowledging it. Hopefully from right now that they will take the deeper dive and listen to these younger folks who are going to make these changes happen, and start looking at your institutions and how do you make them more equitable.
So what does equity mean? Like, you use the word equity, which is not the same as equality. What does it mean,
No.
and what does it mean in practice? Does it just mean hiring more people of color? Because I think a lot of companies
No.
might think that.
Well, they do. A lot of companies do think that. A lot of companies keep using the word diversity, right? And I always say you can have as much diversity within that organization as you want. But if you don't have equitable systems in place, equitable systems that create fairness and equal chances for everyone that's at that table to thrive, then it's futile. That's why people end up leaving companies, because they quickly see I'm not going to go anywhere here. I'm being marginalized. I'm not being promoted the way I should. I'm being ostracized. All of those things that are happening because you haven't done the homework and looked at your home to see what type of equity do we have here? Not just white-centered work, but how is this going to make an impact in all of the communities that we serve? And that's what people don't look at when we talk about looking at things through an equity lens. Think about who's missing from the table, whose voices should be here to help implement these changes.
That's really interesting to point out. From a corporate level, from a group level, are there things that, when you break it down and you speak to a lot of different groups about equity, what kind of things come up as far as individuals and things that we might be doing on a daily basis that are actually racist, borderline racist, but we may just simply not be aware of it?
Oh my God, there's so many. God, I don't think we have enough time during this segment to say everything that's there. But certain things is that you're doing that is, one, by not acknowledging, what equity is, not acknowledging what white supremacy is, not realizing what systemic racism is. So first, doing the homework, on that. A lot of people think, well, I'm a good person. I don't discriminate against anybody. I don't do those things. However, Your silence is deafening, right? You can be, I would say that when you hear the racial jokes, when you hear the disparaging comments made about another group, and you stay silent, you know, to me that shows me, okay, this person is either endorsing racism or they're going to decide to be an anti-racist. Okay, so you have that decision right there. When they remain silent by things like such as you see your black coworker being overlooked time and time again for that promotional opportunity, but you say nothing, you know, you do nothing, or even maybe joke about it. You know, to me, that's showing who you are. You know, there's so many ways to become an anti-racist, you know, and not just stay silent on these topics and things that affect people of color.
I like that. That is something actionable that you can do just even in your own community, among your family and friends, to speak up when you see that, as uncomfortable as it may be sometimes. I'm going to ask you
And
the
that's
million
the
dollar
scary
question.
part, though.
Yeah,
That's the
right.
scary part is that it is scary and it's uncomfortable for people, right? So, and they're not going to change a whole lot of minds in their family. So they know they always got the racist uncle or somebody in their family that they just don't say anything to, right? But you can always say, you know, I'm offended by that. You know, you can say how you feel about it. I wouldn't waste a whole lot of time trying to change their minds because it may not happen, but you can at least say how you feel about it, and you do not want to hear that those comments again in my presence.
Hmm.
That's supporting me.
I'm going to ask you the million dollar question. That's not an
Oh
easy
Lord.
answer, I know, because
Oh,
I think the conversation that we're having now nationally, I think there's a widespread acknowledgement that there is a problem. You know, after all of these years, I think that society as a whole is saying, yeah, we've got a problem. I know that you are a problem solver in your public and private sector jobs. You've been a problem solver in the nonprofit world. So, how do we solve the problem? What is the solution to the issue of racism in our society as it stands now?
you know, I wish I could answer that, but I can't because there's so many answers to that. There's so many pieces to that. It's not just one solution. You know, it isn't. It's a multi-solution, multi-level issue. You've got decades upon decades upon decades of systemic racism, institutionalized racism and oppression that we've dealt with. And we're going to have to peel it back piece by piece, slowly, and make these changes that are sustainable. What happens is, and you know, I've been through the Rodney King riots, you know, all of those things that we've been through in the past, and we see this energy surge for the moment. But then when the honeymoon period is over, 4 or 5 months down the road, we go back to business as usual. We have to start creating sustainable solutions to these. And one is the one easy start is for the white population to start learning about anti racism, to learn about anti Black racism, because everything tends to be targeted towards us. Yet we're the ones that always lead the change for everyone. And then when changes are made, we're the ones left in the dust. We're left in the past about it because everyone else benefits from it. So, like I said, now I think with this next generation, these young folks that are out there protesting, they're going to make the changes that we need. I think folks in my generation need to kind of step back, let them lead some of these changes. Yes, we can be there for advice if they want it, but I think they're going to be the game changers. They're the ones that are going to come up with solutions, and we should just be there to help them, assist them along the way. But it's multiple steps in solving that. It's not just one answer to that question. But the one thing I will say, action. Do something.
I love that, and acknowledge too that I think you and I have talked about how it can be clumsy. It can be a clumsy process. You might make mistakes along the way. You might ask questions that don't seem that intelligent. Because it is a difficult subject to kind of wind through and to understand. But it doesn't mean that you should stop asking the questions and stop trying to understand the problem as a whole.
Right.
Speaking of
and that's
questions,
the thing too. I think
yeah, go ahead.
think really quick. I think that people are afraid because they want to be so politically correct that they stay frozen. They stay silent with asking any questions. So they stay in that what I call dumb zone, right? And just make assumptions. But it's okay. I have a group there in Portland, the Portland Metro Diversity Employment Network that I started like 8 years ago. And they know that when they come to those meetings that they have to keep it real, right? And I create a sense of safety in those spaces so people can ask the questions, no matter how crazy or off the wall they may seem, but we're there to help and to start this dialogue on that. So yes, you're going to fumble along the way, but the thing is, keep going, keep moving forward. Don't let that one mistake that you may make freeze you into staying silent.
You said ask questions, and I've invited the audience to do just that. So I want to get to some of these questions that the audience has submitted in advance of this interview. And I see lots of people chiming in right now. Thank you, Asia, Anthony, and Vanessa, and Rosetta for weighing in on Facebook right now online. Here's a question that came in. What if racism is the default position? I've seen or heard several times recently commentators proclaim that racism is taught early. But what if racism is not taught at all? We're still overwhelmingly tribal. I vote to recognize that and deal with it rather than asserting that racists teach racism to their children. That, to me, is more us versus them. And we, the enlightened, just need to get them, the racists, to stop doing that. No, it is us. It's all of us. Can you speak to that?
Yes, The thing is, I think it's important for families with white children to understand that if you don't teach them about this, if you don't expose them to these issues and avoid the stereotypes, then their peers at school and the media will teach them. And it's usually incorrect. So it's very important for families, for white families, to have these conversations around humanity, right? Center it with human first, but it's important to have these conversations because, the program that I have, iUrban Teen, we have an intentional reach to Black male youth, but we're inclusive of all. So we have girls in our program, we have youth with disabilities in our program, we have low opportunity white youth in our program. And I do that on purpose because I want them to be and work together and understand race. Right now, we have a Friday show for our iUrban Teen platform for our students, and it's on race and healing, and it's open to all youth because they're the ones, that next generation, that's going to cure this. But again, it's so important for these families. If you don't have those conversations about anti-racism to your children, society will teach them, and usually it's incorrect. So you want to be ahead of the game and instill those family that knowledge from family first, and let that be embedded in their whole DNA before they go out into society.
I noticed, Deena, that when you talk about the youth, you're not labeling them with at risk.
No.
These are kids that are on the bubble. I think words matter when it comes to race and how we label each other. Like if you label kids as at risk, that's how they're going to see themselves.
Exactly. And that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't share that with you. But yeah, you will not see anywhere on our website the use of at risk. Only the descriptor that I have for our youth is brilliant. I think that we use those frames of reference that dominant culture has labeled us, and it can be damaging and put us in that box. So I don't consider any of our children at risk, not at all.
I think that's interesting because growing up, I mean, you might have labeled me at risk. Like I was growing up, in a neighborhood that was like middle to lower class, and I was in a single parent family. I'm a woman of color. I understand I'm Asian, so it comes with different kinds of stereotypes. Particularly female Asians come with different stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
And even male Asians come with different stereotypes of being submissive and passive. And, my stereotypes happen to be more positive. Oh, she's probably good at math, right? Like that's generally what people say about, Asian kids or whatever. But that's why that at-risk label just really doesn't work and can actually be damaging. There's another comment that came in that I wanted to ask you about. Someone wrote in to the show. If I was on the Minneapolis police force and noticed that Derek Chauvin was a racist, if I had complained about it to supervisors, would that have helped him get fired? Even if that department were perfect, how can such a complaint ever be addressed? Wouldn't it be as easy to say that I was the bad guy for making a very subjective complaint? We all have biases. If whites on average have racial biases affecting our day-to-day decisions and leading to worse outcomes for racial minorities on average, what can be done to fix that?
Oh, that's another systemic racism issue, especially within the police force. But again, with any organization, especially if you are someone of color that's making the complaint, it's more than likely going to be overlooked. They're not going to take it seriously. There's not going to be any repercussions usually. But if you are someone that is non-Black or non of color, they may take it a little bit more seriously. So I would say the important thing to do is to still speak up. And I encourage my folks from my community to speak up, have your voices heard, make sure things are documented. They may not do anything, but think if you didn't file a complaint and something happened. I would say always make that complaint, give your comments, document it, follow it up with an email, something. I have a feeling now, because of everything that's happened, they're going to be looking at these issues more seriously. So always speak up, always speak your truth. And that can be very hard for when you are the only one. In fact, I have the series called Managing While Other, and when you are the other within an organization, but how do you have your voice heard without fear of repercussions? Because even we talk about white silence, Black silence can be damaging as well.
Absolutely. Something that's come up a couple times, both on Facebook and with the comments that are coming in live right now. And again, I appreciate people who are chiming in, folks like Rachel and Ivy. It's this idea of being raised colorblind. And I think I want to say that idea was pretty popular when I was growing up too. I mean, there was even okay, correct me if I'm wrong. There's like a song lyric that's like, be colorblind and the rest will follow. Something like that, where it's like, oh, don't see color. Be colorblind. Be blind to color. And it kind of dovetails with the question that comes in from Diana, who says, I'm so saddened by when I say, let's join hands and be nice. And I'm told, you don't get it. You're white. So what part of us being nice is bad? What's your thought on that?
Okay, well, first let's talk about the colorblind thing, comments. And I've heard that over the years too, by whites that had good intention, saying, I'm colorblind. I treat everyone the same. You are not colorblind. You see that I am a Black woman with crazy red hair. You see these things, right? You see color, and I'm offended that you don't see color, right? That's the ultimate statement for white privilege, right? So yes, we do want you to recognize us for who we are and the individualness that we bring into a situation. So never say I'm colorblind, because you're not. The other thing about the person saying that they wanted to grab hands and let's all be nice, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't. You have work to do. I would rather you say to me, I'm really feeling badly about what's happening in society right now. I am going to do my part by doing my work and learning more about how do I become anti-racist, instead of coming to me and saying, let's hold hands and let's be nice. We've been nice for all, all of our lives. And look where it's gotten us, right? So I would say, again, that was a faux pas that she made. That was a mistake that she should not have made, but she should not stop with doing the work, right? So she might have gotten her feelings hurt, but we've had a whole lot more damage than that, in our communities. So yeah, you're going to fumble, you're going to make mistakes, but keep going. You might get offended by something we may tell you, but we have the right to speak our truth and to speak from our hearts.
And just come with an open mind. I think, if anything, that's what I've learned, particularly in the last several weeks, is to have an open mind, to listen, to do a better job of listening and understanding and empathizing. Because, as I put in the promotion to this show, has the national conversation spurred you to check yourself? And it has, even for me. Because people of color aren't immune to the idea of stereotyping others and making snap judgments of others just because my skin happens to be of a different color. So I so appreciate your insight. We will be creating a tip sheet based on this episode, and hopefully any resources that you wanted to share with our audience if they wanted to further their learning on this topic. Deena, thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so very much. I'll send you some info.
Appreciate it. And thank you for joining me for this episode of That Expert Show. Really appreciate all the comments that you have weighed in with. We post all of our episodes on thatexpertshow.com along with the tip sheet summarizing the key points of the episode and further resources. If you wanted to do some of the research that Deena is talking about, you can check out our channel on YouTube. We also put this out as a podcast. Every episode is on Apple iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, all those good places. Please connect with me on social media. Just look for Anna Canzano on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I appreciate your feedback and your suggestions on topics and guests that you think that I should cover and take on next, because that is the nature of That Expert Show. If you can subscribe, give a like, share this episode with others, and be part of the solution and spread the word about the work we're doing, I would sure appreciate that. It's called That Expert Show, and it is where you help run the show.